Welcome to the deep dive. We sift through complex topics, pull out the key insights, and bring them straight to you. Today, we're looking at India's democracy. It's a fascinating, complex, sometimes controversial.
Absolutely. It's the world's largest democracy, a republic since 47.
And for a long time, really admired, especially by other developing nations, for keeping democratic principles going despite, well, enormous challenges.
Incredible odds, yeah.
So our mission today is to really unpack the health of India's democracy right now. Is it thriving, facing headwinds? We've gathered a whole range of sources, articles, research, global reports, those democracy index things.
Yeah, from detailed historical looks to those big annual assessments.
The goal is to give you a nuanced picture, its strengths, the challenges people are talking about, and how the rest of the world is seeing it.
Sounds good. Where should we start?
Let's begin with the foundations. I mean, what made India's democracy seem so robust for, over 70 years? What are those core elements?
Okay, well, number one has to be the elections themselves. They're regular, national, state, local level. It's constant.
Right, and run by the Election Commission, the ECI.
Exactly, the ECI.
Right.
It's set up as an independent body, and generally it's respected for, managing these incredibly complex elections pretty efficiently.
And people turn out, don't they?
They really do. Voter turnout is consistently high, especially interestingly among rural and poorer populations, like 67% in the 2019 general election. That's huge.
Wow, for that scale.
Yeah. And they use technology too, like the electronic voting machines, the EVMs, to handle it all.
Okay, so regular large-scale elections. But it's not just about voting, it's about choice, right? What about political pluralism?
There's another key strength, definitely. You've got loads of parties, national ones, strong regional ones.
So no single party just dominates everything.
Well, no single party monopoly, certainly not historically across the board. Power shifts between different alliances, and you often see states electing different parties than the one ruling at the center.
Which means coalitions are pretty normal.
Very common, yeah. It reflects that diversity of political views across the country.
Okay, so elections, pluralism, what else forms that bedrock?
The independent judiciary is absolutely critical. The Supreme Court, the high courts, they have the power of judicial review.
Meaning they can strike down laws?
Exactly. Laws, government actions, if they're deemed unconstitutional. And judicial activism has been really important sometimes.
Like on what kinds of issues?
Oh, environmental stuff, like court orders on air quality in Delhi, civil rights, big time, even pushing electoral reforms. They've shaped a lot.
So a powerful check there. Does that independence sort of filter down or connect with civil society?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say India has a remarkably vibrant civil society, a long tradition of activism.
We hear about that sometimes, like anti-corruption movements.
Definitely, like the Anna Hazare movement a while back,
Yeah.
but also movements for women's rights, Dalit rights, environmental protection. It's very active.
So NGOs, media, citizens, they push back.
They do. They challenge the state, challenge corporations. They act as another layer of checks and balances. Really vital.
And then there's the structure itself, federalism. How important is that piece?
Hugely important. Power isn't just held in Delhi. It's constitutionally shared between the central government and, 28 states and 8 union territories.
So that allows for more localized democracy.
Yes, and it's crucial for managing India's sheer diversity. The Supreme Court even called federalism a basic feature of the Constitution. Can't be easily changed.
Right, that Kesavananda Haradi case.
That's the one. It helps reconcile that national identity with very strong local identities and needs. Some call it a salad bowl culture,
Instead of a melting pot.
Exactly. Different parts keep their distinct flavors, but they're all in the same bowl. It's quite unique, really, for managing that scale.
Okay, so that paints a picture of a pretty resilient, complex democratic structure. But here's where it gets, as you said, more complicated. Recent years have brought a lot more scrutiny, more concerns. What are the key challenges our sources are highlighting now?
Well, a really big one, showing up in lots of reports, is the erosion of civil liberties, and particularly press freedom.
How bad is it looking on that front?
The rankings aren't great.
Yeah.
Reporters Without Borders, for instance, they rank India quite low, like 151st to 161st out of 180. They call the situation very serious for journalists.
Facing what? Threats? Lawsuits?
All of that. Threats, lawsuits, even arrests. And beyond the press, there are broader concerns about restrictions on freedom of speech, peaceful protests.
Squeezing specific laws.
Yeah, criticism about the use of old sedition laws, anti-terror laws like the UAPA, plus things like internet shutdowns, which happen quite often in certain areas, and surveillance tech. concerns about monitoring dissent.
That sounds like a definite shift. Are there other, maybe social or political trends causing concern?
The research also consistently points to rising majoritarianism and communal politics,
Including
more religious polarization, more hate speech. And that leads to worries about minorities feeling marginalized, particularly Muslims. The rise of Hindu nationalism is often mentioned in this context.
And how does that kind of identity politics affect democracy?
Well, the argument is it can weaken national unity, potentially undermine that shared democratic spirit if groups feel excluded or targeted.
Okay, so civil liberties, press freedom, rising polarization. You mentioned earlier the importance of elections. Are there now concerns about electoral integrity itself?
Yes, that's another area flagged, especially around political funding. The electoral bond scheme, for example.
That was the one allowing anonymous donations.
Essentially, yeah.
Yes.
Very opaque. It raised serious questions about transparency and who might be influencing policy through donations.
Didn't the Supreme Court weigh in on that?
It did, quite strongly. It struck down the scheme. The court pointed out issues like businesses being able to donate, even if they were making losses, which seemed odd. And they used the term colorable legislation, suggesting it might have had a hidden purpose, potentially undermining the right to information.
So transparency issues there. What about the playing field? Fairness between parties?
There are also concerns voiced in some sources about the alleged misuse of government agencies like the CBI, the Enforcement Directorate, the Income Tax Department against opposition figures.
Right, accusations of political targeting.
That's the concern raised, yeah, that it could skew the political contest.
This connects back to what you said about institutions. If the judiciary is independent, but other bodies maybe face pressure, how does that weakening of institutions play out?
That seems to be a central theme in many critiques. For instance, reports suggest parliamentary debates have become shorter, less frequent, perhaps less substantive.
So Parliament itself is seen as weaker.
By some, yes.
Yeah.
And then you have constitutional bodies like the Election Commission we mentioned earlier, or the Comptroller and Auditor General, who audits government spending. There's a perception, noted in several analyses, that they might be under more political pressure now. Their independence is being watched closely.
So less debate, potential pressure on oversight bodies. Does it feel like power is getting more centralized?
That's a recurring point of the literature, yeah. An overall centralization of power, potentially using legal tools to sideline or suppress opposition. It raises questions about fundamental political rights.
Okay, this is quite a list of challenges. So how does this all add up when we look at global perception? Is India still that democratic role model?
It's complex. On one hand, yes, that admiration still exists. Many developing nations still look at India and see proof that democracy can work despite poverty, huge population, incredible diversity.
Proof it's not just a Western concept.
Exactly. That it can function in a non-Western post-colonial setting. Sources say it inspired movements in places like Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, even parts of Africa. There's real acknowledgement of successfully implementing universal voting rights and managing diversity democratically for so long.
There's a but, isn't there?
There is. That admiration is definitely getting tempered by these growing concerns we've discussed. And you see that reflected very clearly in the global democracy indices.
Like Freedom House, what do they say?
Freedom House, based in the U.S., now classifies India as partly free. Its score dropped. It's around 63 out of 100 now. They specifically point to discrimination against minorities, those internet restrictions, and using state agencies against critics.
And other indices. The Economists.
The Economist Intelligence Unit from the UK calls India a flawed democracy. Its score also dipped from around 7.9 back in 2014 to near 7.2 or 7.3 recently. That puts it around 41st globally, sort of comparable to Poland.
And VDEM, they're often cited too.
VDEM from Sweden has been quite stark. They've talked about autocratization and noted a significant drop in India's ranking on their Electoral Democracy Index from 65th in 2014 down to 108th in 2023.
Wow, that's a big slide.
It is. And all these reports, they tend to echo the same core issues. Suppressing dissent, weakening press freedom, concerns about electoral transparency.
So the narrative is shifting.
It really seems to be. India becomes this fascinating but worrying case study. A country that defied the odds for decades, now facing serious questions about its democratic trajectory.
And some experts are using pretty strong language, like electoral autocracy.
Yes, that term comes up. The warning is that if institutions weaken further, India might keep holding elections but lose the substance of democracy. The freedoms, the checks and balances, And that, of course, dims its appeal as a democratic model for others. It's a huge test, really, for democracy on a grand scale.
Okay, so we have this picture. Historic strength, significant current challenges, and a global reputation that's becoming more troubled. Given all that, what do the sources suggest could be done? What are the pathways forward to strengthen Indian democracy?
Well, the most fundamental thing, echoed across many analyses, is strengthening institutions, reinforcing the independence of the judiciary, the ECI, the CAG, all those key constitutional bodies. Their autonomy is seen as absolutely crucial.
Makes sense. Protect the referees, essentially.
You could put it that way, yeah. And alongside that, protecting press freedom. That means ensuring journalists are safe, legally and physically, and safeguarding internet freedoms too. You need that open discourse.
And tackling that murky area of election funding.
Absolutely. Reforming electoral finance is key. Making party funding transparent. Dealing with the kinds of issues raised by the electoral bond saga. Promoting clean money in politics. Leveling the playing field.
What about the social divisions we talked about? The polarization.
Promoting inclusive politics is vital. That means actively protecting minority rights, finding ways to reduce polarization, and really leaning into that diverse salad bowl identity rather than pushing for uniformity, valuing difference.
And maybe pushing power downwards, too. You mentioned federalism earlier.
Yes, empowering local governments more, increasing the autonomy for the Panchayati Raj system, local self-governance, and for urban bodies. Some sources point to Kerala's model as an example of effective local governance, bringing democracy closer to the people.
And underlying all this, I guess, is the citizen.
For sure. Civic education comes up, making sure people are aware of their constitutional rights and duties, empowering them to participate effectively.
Which brings us back to core democratic principles. Some sources mention Robert Dahl's standards: effective participation, voting equality.
Right, enlightened understanding, control of the agenda, inclusion. Those are benchmarks.
How do you translate those into practical steps?
Well, the material suggests things like reducing powerful autonomous groups within the state that control force, trying to insulate politics from deep-seated inequalities like caste, and building trust between citizens and the state, maybe through things like the Right to Information Act.
So it's an ongoing process, really, balancing things like transparency and privacy, adapting.
Exactly. Knowledge is one thing, applying it is another. Strengthening democracy isn't a one-off fix. It needs constant work, adaptation, resilience from within the system, and crucially from its people.
Okay, so let's try and pull this together. India is still, undeniably, the world's largest democracy, admired for its scale, its history of managing diversity, holding elections. That's the bedrock. But there are serious headwinds. Restrictions on civil liberties, on free speech, on the press. These have led global observers to shift their view, classifying its democracy now as flawed or partly free.
That captures the tension, yeah.
And it makes you think about that idea, I think it was in one of the papers, that a country doesn't have to be deemed fit for democracy, rather it has to become fit through democracy.
That's a powerful thought. It implies it's a continuous struggle, a process of learning and building.
Exactly. So India's journey is clearly a testament to its people's democratic spirit over decades. But these current challenges, they pose a really critical question, don't they? Can India not just sort of patch things up, but actually deepen its democratic health? And in doing so, continue to shape its own future, obviously, but also influence how the whole world thinks about democracy, especially democracy on such an immense, complex scale. What more can its ongoing story teach all of us about the hard work of making democracy real?